Lesson 2, topic midpoints and bisectors. Learning target, I can find the midpoint of a segment and use the bisector to solve problems. Vocab, congruent segments are line segments that have the same length. So they are marked with these tick marks is what we call them. And they tell us that the segments are congruent. So you can see there we have congruent segments, lengths are equal, and segments are congruent. So we have midpoint is a point on a line segment that divides the segment into two congruent segments. So we have two tick marks here and two tick marks here, meaning that AM, segment AM, is congruent to segment MB. So when we're talking about the segments and congruency, we use the lines over the top of the segments. When we're talking about lengths, so we were talking about like the length of AM, so say AM was 7, we would say that the length of AM, so just AM, equals MB. So when we use equality, we don't put the lines over AM, because AM with no line over it just means the length of segment AM. So we could also say AM equals 7. A segment bisector is a point, ray, line segment, or plane that intersects the segment at its midpoint. So it still cuts it into two congruent pieces, and it's something that goes through the midpoint. So let's practice. Point S is the midpoint of RT. So we know that this is the middle. Find the length of RS, then find the length of RT. So we know that RS, this piece, is equal to ST because we have the two tick marks saying that those pieces are congruent, and we also know that S is the midpoint, so it's cutting it in half. So I know that RS is equal to ST. So now I can just substitute in those values of RS and ST. RS is 5x minus 2. So I can put 5x minus 2 equals ST is 3x plus 8. So we have 3x plus 8. And now we have an equation that we can solve. So we need to get our variables to one side and our numbers to the other side. So I'm going to move this 3x to the other side. So to get positive 3x to the other side, I'm going to subtract 3x on both sides. And then I'm going to move the minus 2 to the other side. To undo minus 2, I'm going to do plus 2 on both sides. Complete the operations. 5x minus 3x is 2x. Negative 2 plus 2 cancels out. 3x minus 3x cancels out. 8 plus 2 is 10. We have 2 times x equals 10. Divide both sides by 2 to get the x all by itself, and we get x equals 5. Now that's not what we were asked for. We were asked to find the length of RS and the length of RT. So we know that RS equals 5x minus 2. So if I know that x is 5, I can put 5 in for x and solve for RS. 5 times 5 is 25. 25 minus 2 is 23. So I know that RS equals 23. So if RS is 23, so we can change that to 23, then I know that ST is also 23 because they are congruent, which means they have the same measure. So then if I want the length of RT, if I want the length of the whole segment, I would just need to add the two measures together. 23 plus 23 is 46. So RT equals 46. One last piece. If we are working with coordinates in a coordinate plane, to find the midpoint, we have what's called the midpoint formula. So we have 2 points, A and B. Then the midpoint M of segment AB has the coordinates of x1 plus x2. So you take the two x coordinates, add them together, and then divide it by 2. And then you would take the two y coordinates and then divide those by 2, which should make sense because the midpoint is in the middle, or it's cutting the segment in half. So if it cuts something in half, we have to divide it by 2. So the endpoints of RS are R is 1, -3, so let's plot that. 1, -3 right there, point R. And then we have S, which is 4, 2, so we'll plot that as well, 4, 2. Here's point S. We want to find the coordinates of midpoint. So what would be the midpoint of that line? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to label our points. So we have 1, -3. So that'd be x1 and y1. And then we have 4, 2, which is x2 and y2. Then we just have to plug them into our formula. So the midpoint formula says we're going to take the x coordinates, add them together. So we got 1 and 4. Divide those by 2. And then we're going to take the y coordinates, add those together and divide them by 2. So we have -3 plus 2. So then we just do the operations. We have 1 plus 4, which is 5. And then 5 divided by 2, we will get a decimal for that, and that is 2.5. And then we have -3 plus 2, which is -1. -1 divided by 2 is -0.5. You could also leave them as fractions, so you could have left it as 5 over 2 and -1/2. Either answer is acceptable. Now let's check to make sure our answer is good. We have 2.5, so we go to the right 2.5, down about 1/2, and if we plot that point, it is on our line, and it looks to be right about in the middle, so we can say that our math on that is good. That's all your notes. Go ahead and move into your practice.